Hello, everybody. Another beautiful day in the universe. And we get to just become present. As long as we believe there is somewhere to go, something to do, something to fix, something to solve, we are throwing a rock in the pond and it creates a ripple and disturbs our silence. Every thought, every thought of needing to do something, needing to go somewhere, the ego creates separation and isolation. We're isolated in our own pain, our own abandonment, our own rejection, our own hurt, our own pain. We purposely, by the ego, experience separation and isolation. Imagine that if a thought is not love, you're actually throwing a rock in a pond of consciousness and disturbing the natural state of consciousness. It's almost saying that you've got a record and you take the needle and you scratch the needle over the entire record. Yet every groove gives you, every moment gives you the opportunity to be with God, to be in consciousness. But in order to experience the truest essence of our own soul, of who we really are, we need to fall into silence. We need to experience the absolute abode of silence. So when you look at, I'm worried about money, I'm worried about my job, I'm worried about my husband, I'm worried about my wife, I need a new car, I don't like my mother, I love my mother, I don't like my mother, I love my father. As long as we have these endless ripples, we cannot experience true consciousness and not experience the truest essence of who we are. Imagine that your ego is moving around you and moving around you almost like a chain in the ball moving around you. And imagine that when you're really concerned, you're moving at 16 seconds per cycle, 17 seconds per cycle. But when you start to experience true silence, true presence, you start to move only 6 cycles per second, which means you are in front of the ego and you get to experience life in its fullest divinity. In my awakening of self-realization, or what I call the realization of myself, I began to stand still in the universe. So now everything moves around me. Instead of me moving in the universe, I'm standing still and everything is moving around me. And like all these noises of radio stations and people being upset and people disappointed, they're just noises. I can turn all these noises off, that I can just continuously experience silence. To learn to experience real divine silence is that one part of you always needs to be focused on the silence. Even if your ego is dragging you around the block, even if you are truly worried about things, one part of you always needs to experience just complete, absolute peace, absolute silence. When we no longer need to go anywhere, when we no longer need to process anything, I mean, this is a huge statement to make. When I don't need to process anymore, when I don't need to think about anything anymore, when you come to terms that there's nothing wrong ever in this universe, the ego wants you to feel separation and isolation. That's why we worry. We worry about conversations in which we've had. We worry about our future. We worry about things because the ego creates separation and isolation. And the truth is, we're never going to think our way out of this incarnation because the ego creates the problem, but it doesn't create the solution. It's a trap. Silence can exist among many noises that all exist at the same time. You can experience total silence while you're in this universe and all the distractions and all the universes and all the noises, I should say, in this universe doesn't pull you out of your inner silence. When we no longer need to go anywhere, when we no longer need to do anything, when we no longer need to solve anything, when we realize no matter what happens, everything is perfect all the time. It is our ego that creates the imperfection and separation and isolation. Even if a building burns down, everything is perfect. If a building is built, it's perfect. All things return to ashes. All things get regrown. Everything in the universe is perfect, but we need to constantly believe there's something wrong. Every day, the ego wants you to believe there's something wrong, something you need to process. Oh my goodness, did you hear what she said? Oh my goodness, she's not right. Oh my goodness, the way she talked to me. Oh my goodness, I can't believe. We need to constantly find the problems in the universe. And when you put this sword down, put down your sword of needing to process, needing to find an answer, to blame someone, to be angry at something. We don't need to process. We just need to put our swords down that we can experience silence. We're not going anywhere. We're not doing anything. We're not resolving anything. There's nothing to resolve. There's nothing to do. The only thing is to become quiet and become so still that the silence begins to absorb you back into consciousness. The journey of our life is not all of our thoughts and our emotions, all the things that we think are good or bad or wrong. These are not the truest form of representation of who we are. We are divine, beautiful. There's nothing wrong. There's never anything wrong. They're just distractions that we experience. And when we allow ourselves to really become present in the universe, where we don't need to process anything, we don't need to solve anything, we don't need to do anything, we can just be present. Even imperfection is perfection. There's no such thing as perfection or imperfection. It is all made up by the infrastructure of the ego. And when we allow ourselves to no longer need to process thoughts, when we don't need to solve anything anymore, when we don't need to have the answer or the interpretation or the understanding, put down your sword and become present in the now. And this presence will begin to absorb you, where we return back into our natural state of existence. And that is consciousness. That is not processing. That is not solving. That's not fixing. That's not getting the answer. That's not going anywhere. It's not doing anything. It's putting down the sword and allowing ourselves to become nothing. And by becoming nothing, we become everything. And the I that struggles no longer struggles, because I no longer exist. I become we. And as long as I believe that I am a single entity, I will suffer for eternity. And when we move back into consciousness, is then do we experience I'm not separate from anything. I am you and you are me. I am every tree, every kernel of sand, every ocean. I'm the oxygen in the air. I'm no longer separate from anything. And then we no longer need to solve anything, fix anything, or go anywhere. Sadhgurunath Maharaj Ki Jai.